Hey YouTube, I know it's been a while since I've made a video last, but life gets in the way of that. But today I'm going to show you how to change a auger bearing in an Ariens 824. This is an older model, probably from the early 90s. It's in relatively good shape. I know it looks dirty, but it is in good shape. It's not too rusty, but it does have an issue with the auger bearing. I'm going to engage the drive clutch. That's actually the auger bearing and the shaft bouncing up and down on each other. So it's pretty loose. It needs to be replaced. I have already prepped this machine about 2 weeks ago. I flipped it up, I took the pan off, and I sprayed a bunch of that yellow WD-40. It's like the specialist, I don't know, penetrant fluid. And I prepped the machine so hopefully we won't break anything, and hopefully the bearing is free. If not, we'll figure out a way to get it off. Done plenty of these, so not too worried about it. Okay, the next step is going to be to take the chute lever off, the chute rod, whatever you want to call it. I use a cheap pair of Harbor Freight pliers. I get nicer tools for other things, but I usually kind of straighten out the bottom and then smash my thumb. Of course. There. Cotter pins out, pull this rod back, take off the belt cover. Nice and easy. There's 2 bolts. Do the other side too. Pull it off. It can kind of be tricky pulling this cover off. There, like that. Okay, your next step is going to be to separate the machine. You're going to grab a 9/16 with an extension. Just makes it easier getting it past the wheel. And you're going to remove this bolt. Remove this bolt over here. Make sure you have your hand on the machine because it will split. Alright. And your auger belt, I already popped it off the top. Might get in the way. One came right off. That's good. And then take your front housing here and just sometimes they come off a little easier than others. Now you got your machine in 2 pieces. Alright, your next step is to get this pulley off. It looks like someone's been in here at some point in its life because you can tell the bolts are very new looking. So whether or not someone put this back together, couldn't do the job because the bearing was seized, I'm not sure, but we'll find out, won't we? These are 1/2 inch. Hopefully this pulley comes right off. Move this little keeper out of the way. That was fairly easy. So your next step, there's 2 set screws. You might be able to see them. Yeah, you can see one of them. There's a set screw right there. And on the other side, I think, there's another one. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, but we're going to figure out what size it is and get those out next. Alright, so it is actually a 5/32 Allen bit. For all you people out there that know what that means. That's a good sound. And the other one should be right here. Now, like I said in the earlier part of this video, is I actually sprayed a ton of lubricant in this area beforehand to maybe give me a leg up on the job. Okay, so your next step, you get your 3-jaw puller. I got mine at Harbor Freight because I tend to break them, and they're relatively cheap there. As you can see, my impact gun's actually a nice one because I don't break those. But this puller is basically on the way to break, so I'm not one that's going to tell you to wear ear protection and safety glasses and this and that. Wear safety glasses when you use a 3-jaw puller because these nuts and bolts, they'll break. Socket could break. I'm sacrificing a socket. It's not really ideal, but it's just how I've done it in the past. Now you can use a little bit of lubricant. Help you out. And there you go. So here's the guy in question. So the next step that I didn't film was getting the Woodruff key out, and unfortunately I damaged it because it was so stuck in there. I had to use quite a few different tools. I used a big heavy punch to kind of start it, and then unfortunately I had to use a chisel, and then I finished it off with a smaller punch. But it's out, so now I can kind of move on. Okay, so the next step is to remove the flange cover. These are 7/16. Of course it's going to get stuck in there. Why wouldn't it? Get that out later. Pull that off. With any luck, this bearing should come off. It definitely moves, which is a good sign, so I'm probably going to have to sand the shaft a little bit before I take it off completely. But that's a good sign that it's not seized on there, because I've had to cut them off before, and that's never fun. Okay, so I sanded the shaft with this kind of, I don't know what you call it, it's like a Scotch-Brite pad, I guess, just to get all the rust off. But where the set screws are usually causes the bearing to hang up, so I just lightly hit them with this die grinder. Nothing too crazy, just enough to get the bearing to come up. So the true test, here you go. Alright, so here's a and then the new bearing. So just a comparison. Okay, so I had to take a quick road trip. When I cleaned the shop out about a month ago, I had a open jar that never sees stuff, and it was kind of dried up and nasty, and the little paintbrush that comes on the cap broke. So I had to go to Auger Hardware, picked up a bottle of this. This was like $9, which, I mean, it lasts a while, but it's a lot of money. And I picked up a couple Woodruff keys. I'll have one hanging around, and then the one that's going to go in this. So we're going to put all that stuff in, paint a nice little layer of anti-seize on it, so if some jerk like me someday has to take it apart again, they can get it off easier than I did. Okay, so your next step is to get the bearing on. I already got all the never seize on here, so I'm just going to kind of tap it into place. rearrange the socket, but you get the point. I'm going to just kind of tap around there. Obviously a new bearing, the tolerance is going to be super tight, so this is kind of par for the course, but I'm going to finish that off. Alright, so I just finished it off with a small little punch and just lightly tapped it in. It went right down. We're going to replace the flange. I'm going to put the screws in carefully. The bolts rather. Nuts. Whatever word. There we go. Nuts. Okay, those are good. And let's try out my new woodruff key to see if it goes in. Feels like it's gonna. Might have to just give that a couple taps to go in, which I will do right on camera for you. You don't want to get too wild and aggressive here, or else you'll you don't want to wreck something. Kind of with the punch, I'm going up and down to try to get it to go evenly in, and then to finish this I will push the top in a little more than the bottom, so when you actually put this back on, it will be able to seat properly, and as you push this down it will finish off. Sorry, it will finish this woodruff key all the way in just by pushing this down. Okay, so I got the inside of this hub never seized. I did the set screw holes with a little never seized because sometimes those can get stuck. I got an older impact socket from Harbor Freight again. That's not really as nice as the ones I have now, so I'll use this to hit this down nice and evenly and kind of get it. You don't want to go wild here because you are essentially hitting a bearing. But we're going to get it nice and flush. That might be it right there. I can't tell, but I think that's pretty darn close. This never sees stuff. You'll go to bed with it if you're not careful. Look at that. That's perfect. Put the set screws in and get it tightened up. And so this is basically the same way you took apart, and it'll go back together the same way, which is kind of nice. Usually how it goes. Gotta get this started here. Usually kind of get them snug. Start the other one. These look like they have Loctite on them, but I'm not too concerned about. This is actually my machine, so I'm not really overly concerned. I actually got it for free because it had a blown motor, and I actually had I don't remember what this motor came off of, but it was probably either a Troy built or a Husqvarna, one of the older models. There's only certain engines that will fit on this, and the machine was junk. I took the engine off and put it up in my loft for a while, and so that's good and tight. Not too worried about that. I put it up in my loft for a while and Came upon this machine for free, which was nice, and that's how this all evolved. I put the engine on a couple years ago, and it's been kind of sitting since. I haven't really touched it because I have a Ariens ST824 that's in nice shape. I put a brand new gearbox in it, so I got that for free too. The engine ran great, machine was in good shape. I put a gearbox in it because the previous owner blew the gearbox, and he was thrilled with what he got out of the machine, and he wanted to buy a new one. I told him that the new ones aren't necessarily as good as the old ones, and he should probably just keep this one running, but didn't take my advice, unfortunately. And he said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Of course I do. I've tuned it up for a few years, so I'd love to take it off your hands." So I put a brand new gearbox on that, and that's kind of my backup snowblower for the simplicity that I got. And now this, I'm probably just gonna, I don't know, I might sell the 8524 since it has a nice gearbox in it and keep this, but I'm not too sure yet. We'll see. I'm gonna put the next set of put those on. Now, this is no way an endorsement at all, but this DeWalt Impact is the best thing, best tool in my toolbox. There's nothing better than this. It's just a 3/8 drive, and I just use a snap-on extension on it, and it pretty much does everything that you could ever want, for small stuff, of course. But it doesn't break bolts really, which is nice, so you can kind of figure out how torquey it is. But anyways, so here's a good little look at that. That's nice. Moves nice and easy. So that's good. Alright, so I put 2 new belts on. Just took the old ones off and put 2 new ones on. It's good practice to always, while you're in there, you might as well. They're cheap enough, type deal. So I'm going to slowly put these back together. Sometimes they're a little bit tricky. Sometimes the belts get in the way. There we go. I usually finger tighten one side and then same thing over here. Sorry about the camera angle. It's an absolute mess in here. I got like 36 projects going on at once. So, here we go. There we go. Notice I'm using the machine to kind of do it for me. Alright, so I figured out the issue. So for whatever reason, maybe it had the wrong belt on it before. This pulley was like all the way forward on this slide. Let me see if I can kind of show you what I mean. Oh my god. There we go. So see how there's a slide. It was all the way to the right there, and I couldn't get the belt around it, so I just adjusted it, and I'm going to tighten it back up. Usually the adjustment is kind of all the way out, so then when you push that lever in, it's nice and tight, and when it's not, it can slide. So that's all the way out is actually perfect. So that's how you know it's the correct belt. I didn't go to the usual store that I go to for belts because they're closed. Today's actually a Sunday. Believe it or not, some people have to work on Sundays to make a living. So I'm going to put the bolt back into this belt finger, and we will test the machine after. Okay, it's time for the true test here. This machine hasn't been started in actually a few weeks. Kind of just been pushing it around with all the other projects that are going on.